I've sold coffee across from the gray gate at Ashcroft Palace for 11 years now. 11 years, same cart, same corner, same crack in the pavement I trip on every single morning even though I know it's there. And in all that time, I thought I'd seen everything a person could see outside those gates. Weddings, funerals, protests. A man who proposed to his girlfriend right there on the railing and then dropped the ring down a drain. Tourists fainting in the heat. Tourists arguing about which guard was the real one. A pigeon that once landed on a guardsman's bearskin cap and just stayed there for a full 20 minutes while the poor man didn't move a muscle. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. Because the thing I saw that afternoon, the thing I'm about to tell you, I still don't fully have the words for, and I've had months to find them. Let me back up, let me tell it the way it happened. It was a Thursday, late September but warm. One of those cheat days autumn gives you before it turns cold for real. The sky was that thin pale blue, almost white, and the light came down soft over the palace stone so the whole building looked like something out of a painting my grandmother used to have. Ashcroft Palace, if you've never seen it, sits at the top of a long gravel forecourt behind a tall black and gold gate. The gray gate, everyone calls it, though it's not gray at all. Someone painted it dark years ago and the name just stuck. Elsmore's a small kingdom. We don't have the crowds some places have. But on a warm day like that one, the tourists come. They line up along the railings with their phones. They wait for the changing of the guard. They point. And they always try to make the guards laugh. I've watched 1,000 people try. They pull faces. They tell jokes. They stand next to the guard and do silly poses. The guards never break. That's the whole point of them. They stare straight ahead at nothing, still as statues, hands on their rifles, and they let the world happen around them like water going around a stone. Callum Reed was on the near post that day. I knew him. Well, I knew him the way you know someone you see most mornings but never really talk to. He'd been on that gate maybe 2 years, tall lad, younger than his straight face made him look. He'd buy a coffee from me in the early mornings before his shift, black, no sugar, and he never said much beyond morning and ta. But he always said it. Some of them don't even do that. There was one thing about him I noticed over time. He had this little habit. When a child came up to the railings, a really little one, a toddler, wide-eyed staring up at him like he was a giant from a story, his eyes would flick down. Just for half a second. Just the eyes, not the head. And then back up front. Nobody else would catch it. But from where I stood, angled across the road, I saw it more than once. He liked kids. You could tell. Even standing frozen at his post, some part of him softened when the small ones came close. Keep that in your head. It matters later. So it's a Thursday, warm, maybe 2 in the afternoon. I remember the smell of my own cart, the coffee, the little cinnamon buns I warm up in the mornings. I remember a group of schoolkids in yellow vests being herded past by 2 exhausted-looking teachers. I remember an old couple sharing an ice cream on the bench near my cart, the man wiping the woman's chin with a napkin, and thinking, that's 50 years of marriage right there, that little wipe. Ordinary things. That's what I keep coming back to, how ordinary it all was right up until it wasn't. At some point that afternoon, a royal car came through the gate. That happens. Not every day, but often enough that the tourists get excited about it and I don't. The gate opens, the gravel crunches, a dark car rolls out or rolls in, and everyone lifts their phones. This one was rolling in, coming back to the palace, not leaving it. Slow, the way they always go through the crowd, with 2 outriders on those quiet motorbikes. The car stopped just inside the gate. And this is the part that started it all, though nobody knew it yet. 2 children got out. I found out afterward who they were, but at the time I only saw 2 small figures in nice clothes step out onto the gravel with a woman I took to be a nanny or a minder. A little girl, maybe 8, in a pale coat, and a smaller boy, 6 at most, in a little navy jumper, clutching something in his hand, a toy, I think. A small toy plane. He kept lifting it up and swooping it through the air. Princess Amelie and Prince Rowan, though I didn't know their names then. Now you have to understand the royal children of Elsmore don't get paraded about. We don't see them much. So the crowd along the railing sort of rippled when they realized who the kids were. Phones came up. A few people gasped, the way people do. The little girl gave a small, careful wave toward the railings, the kind of wave a child gives when they've been taught to be polite but they're a bit shy about it. The boy didn't wave. The boy was busy flying his plane. And that little toy plane is where everything started to go wrong. Here's what I pieced together from what I saw and what others told me later. The children weren't meant to be out in the open for long. The car had stopped closer to the gate than usual because of some other vehicle blocking the inner drive. The minder was trying to move them quickly across the forecourt toward the side entrance, the one the family actually uses, away from the crowd. But the boy, Rowan, he was flying that plane, swooping it, not paying a bit of attention to the grown-up voice telling him to come along. You know how little ones get. They lock onto one thing and the whole rest of the world goes quiet for them. He swooped the plane a little too hard, and it slipped out of his hand. I actually saw it. This tiny silver and red thing, cartwheeling through the air, catching the light. It flew maybe 10 feet and came down, not on the palace side of the gate where the boy was. It came down on the public side, through the bars, out onto the pavement, near the road. Near where the crowd was, near where the cars went by. Now that alone wouldn't have been a catastrophe, a dropped toy, a grown-up fetches it, nothing. But two things happened at nearly the same moment, and they stacked on top of each other in the worst way. The first thing, the boy went after it. Before the minder could grab him, and I mean before, it was that fast, little Rowan darted. Not toward the side entrance, toward the gate, toward the gap where the gate stood open for the car. He'd seen exactly where his plane landed and he was going to get it, and no grown-up on earth was fast enough in that half-second. He slipped through the open gate, out onto the public side, toward the road. The second thing happened at the exact same moment, and it's the thing that turned a scary moment into a genuinely dangerous one. There was a horse. One of the ceremonial mounted guards had been coming up the far side of the road, part of some detail. I don't know the details of their movements. I only know what I saw. A big gray horse, beautiful thing, being ridden slow along the edge of the forecourt. And something spooked it. I've thought about what it was 100 times. Maybe a phone dropped. Maybe someone shouted when the boy ran. Maybe it was the flash of that little plane skittering across the pavement. Maybe it was all of it at once. The sudden movement, the noise, the ripple of panic going through the crowd as people realized a small child had just run through a gate toward a road. Whatever it was, the horse threw its head, reared half up, and came down sideways, big hooves scrabbling on the pavement, the rider hauling on the reins, the whole animal lurching in exactly the wrong direction. Toward the boy. I want to tell you what a crowd sounds like when it all realizes something bad at once. It's not a scream, not at first. It's a kind of intake, 100 people sucking in breath together, a wall of gasps. And then it breaks apart into shouting, the minder's voice, high and terrified, screaming the boy's name, Rowan, Rowan. Someone yelling, the horse, the horse. A woman near my cart pressing both hands over her mouth. And the boy, little Rowan, froze. That's what small children do. They don't run from danger, they freeze in it. He was maybe 15 feet outside the gate on the pavement, his little plane on the ground in front of him, and this enormous panicked animal was coming down sideways not far from him, and he just stood there, staring up, that toy forgotten, his mouth a little open. The rider couldn't get the horse fully under control, not instantly. You can't. Half a ton of frightened animal doesn't stop because you want it to. And every grown-up who should have reached the boy was too far. The minder was still inside the gate, tangled in the moment, screaming. The crowd was behind the railings, hands out, useless. The car's driver was scrambling out but on the wrong side. Nobody could get to him in time. Except one person. Callum Reed was at his post at the gray gate. You have to understand what that means. That post, the rules of it. A guardsman on ceremonial duty does not leave his post. It's not a suggestion. It's not unless something comes up. It is the thing. The entire meaning of standing that gate is that you do not move. Not for jokes, not for weather, not for a pigeon on your head. You hold. That's the whole point of you. The stillness is the message. This place is kept and nothing moves it. I'd watched Callum hold that line through everything. I told you about the kids and his little eye flick. But I'd also seen him hold when a drunk man screamed in his face for 10 straight minutes. Hold when a group of lads tried everything to make him crack. Hold in rain so hard I'd closed my cart and gone home and he was still there, water pouring off his cap, staring straight ahead. He did not move. That was who he was. And here's the thing, in that first frozen second, he didn't move then either. I was watching him. I don't know why my eyes went to him and not the boy. Maybe because I knew him. Maybe because some part of me already knew he was the only one close enough. But I was looking right at Callum Reed's face when it all happened, and I saw it. I saw the exact moment. The man behind the soldier woke up. His eyes went to the boy, then to the horse, then back to the boy, and I swear to you I saw him fight it. I saw the training and the rule and the whole meaning of that gate holding him in place for one more terrible half-second, hands on the rifle, jaw locked, spine straight, the good soldier who does not leave his post. And then I saw a small figure appear at the gate. The little girl. Princess Amelie. She'd run after her brother, or the minder had let go of her, or she'd pulled free. I don't know, but suddenly she was there at the open gate, this tiny thing in a pale coat, and she was looking straight at Callum Reed. The nearest guard. The only one close enough. And she did the thing I will never, ever forget. She didn't scream like the others. Her voice cracked, but it wasn't a scream. It was worse than a scream somehow. She looked right at him and she said, and half the crowd heard it, it went quiet enough in that one pocket of the world that we all heard it. Please, please, that's my brother, please help him. Please. To a guard who wasn't allowed to move. From a little girl who didn't know the rules, or didn't care about them, because the only thing in her whole world right then was her little brother frozen on the pavement in front of a panicking horse. Please help him. And that's where I have to stop for now, because my hands are actually shaking a little bit typing this out, even now, months later. I've told you what came before, the warm Thursday, the coffee cart, the plane, the boy, the horse, the crowd, the little girl at the gate saying please to a man in a bearskin cap who had every rule in the kingdom telling him to stand still. What happened in the next 10 seconds is the reason I'm telling you any of this at all. Because Callum Reed made a choice. And nothing about that gate or that boy or that little girl, or honestly me, was ever quite the same after. People say that in a crisis time slows down. I used to think that was just something people said, a nice phrase, the kind of thing you put in a story to make it sound bigger than it was. I don't think that anymore. Because I was there and I can tell you it's true, it's real. Those 10 seconds outside the gray gate stretched out so long and so slow that I can still walk through them one at a time, like frames of a film I've watched too many times. And I want to give them to you the same way. Slow. One at a time. Because that's the only way you'll understand what Callum Reed did. So 10 seconds, here they are. 1. The little girl says it, please help him. And I watch it hit Callum Reed like a physical thing. I'm looking right at his face. I told you about the training holding him, the rule, the meaning of the gate, the whole weight of standing still. For one more heartbeat, I see all of that still winning. His body doesn't move. He is a statue with a war going on behind his eyes. 2. The horse comes down again. Sideways, half-rearing, hooves clattering on the stone, the rider hauling back on the reins with everything he's got, and it's still not enough, not yet, not fast enough. The animal's eyes are white and wild. Little Rowan is directly in the arc of where those front hooves are going to land if the horse pitches forward one more time. 3. I hear my own voice. I didn't even know I'd made a sound until later, just oh no, quiet, useless. Both my hands flat on the counter of my cart. The old man on the bench is on his feet. The whole crowd is one held breath. 4. And Callum Reed moves. I want to be careful here because I've told this story enough times now that I know how it sounds. It sounds like a film. It sounds too clean. But I'm telling you exactly what my eyes saw, and what my eyes saw was this. The statue broke. He didn't hesitate a second longer. He didn't look around for permission. He didn't set his rifle down neatly. There was no ceremony to it at all, and that's the part that stunned me most, because everything those men do is ceremony. This wasn't. This was raw. He came off that post like something released. Rifle still in one hand, cap nearly coming off his head, and he ran. 5. Fast? God, he was fast. I'd never seen one of them so much as shift their weight, and here was Callum Reed sprinting across the stone in those heavy boots, that whole formal getup, straight at the boy and the horse. 6. The rider gets a half-second of control, just enough to drag the horse's head to the side, so the animal spins rather than pitches forward. But spinning half a ton of panic in a small space is its own danger. The back end swings. The horse's body comes round, and now instead of the front hooves it's the whole animal's weight lurching sideways toward the boy. 7. Callum reaches him. He doesn't slow down and scoop him up gentle. There's no time for gentle. He hits the boy at a full run and just takes him, wraps him. One arm right around the middle, snatching him clean off his feet, and uses his own momentum to carry them both the other way, twisting his body so he's between the child and the horse. His back to the animal, the boy tucked against his chest. 8. The horse comes round, and Callum Reed takes it. The animal's shoulder, its side, some part of that huge frightened body, it catches him. Not square on, thank God, or he'd have gone down and the boy with him. But it clips him hard across the back and the shoulder as he's turning away, and I hear it. That awful heavy sound of a body being struck. He staggers. 3, 4 steps, fighting to stay up, the boy clamped against him. And for one horrible instant I'm sure they're both going down onto the stone under those hooves. 9. He doesn't go down. I don't know how. I've thought about it, and I don't know how a man takes a blow like that off balance carrying a child and keeps his feet. But he did. He stumbled, he lurched, and he stayed up, and he kept moving, 3 more staggering steps, carrying the boy clear of the horse, clear of the road, back toward the gate, until he was out of the danger and he sort of folded down onto one knee, still curled around the child, his own body wrapped over him like a shell. 10. The rider gets the horse. Finally, hauls it round and away, the animal's hooves skittering, the whole thing brought back under control 10 feet from where the boy had been. And then it was over. 10 seconds. That's all it was. I counted them out for you slow because that's how they felt, but if you'd filmed it and played it back, it would have been over before you finished a sip of coffee. 10 seconds, and a man who wasn't allowed to move had crossed 20 feet of stone, put himself between a child and a panicking horse, taken the blow with his own back, and come out the other side of it still holding the boy. Now here's the part I really want you to hear. Because the running, the grabbing, the taking of the hit, that's the part that goes on the news, that's the part people gasp at. But it's not the part that stayed with me the most. The part that stayed with me is what happened right after. In the quiet, when Callum Reed was down on one knee on the stone, and the danger was gone, and he was still curled around that little boy. He didn't stand up straight away and hand him off. He stayed down for a second, just a second or two. And I was close enough. I'd come round the front of my cart, by then without even realizing I'd moved. I was close enough to see his face over the top of the boy's head. And Callum Reed, this man I'd watched hold a statue's stillness through rain and drunks and pigeons, this man who I'd never seen show one flicker of anything, his face was completely undone. His eyes were shut. His jaw was working. He had the boy pressed against him and one big hand cupped around the back of the child's head, the way you'd hold something impossibly precious, and he was murmuring something. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. You could see the shape of it. You've got you. I've got you. You're all right, you're all right. To a child who wasn't his, whose name he probably didn't even know. That's the moment. That's the one I'd trade all the rest for if I had to pick, not the brave run. The after. The tenderness of a hard man holding a frightened child and telling him he was safe. The boy was crying by then. That delayed kind of crying kids do, where the fright takes a moment to catch up to them and then it all comes out at once. But he was crying into the shoulder of Callum Reed's uniform, which meant he was alive to cry, which meant everything. And then the little girl reached them. Princess Amelie, the one who'd said please. She came flying across that stone, nobody stopping her now, and she didn't stop at a polite distance the way royal children are trained to. She just threw herself down next to them and grabbed her brother, and for a second the three of them were all tangled together on the ground. The guardsman on one knee, the little boy sobbing, and the girl with both arms round them, saying her brother's name over and over. And then, and I saw this, I was right there, Amelie looked up at Callum Reed. This 8-year-old girl with her whole face wet looked up at the man who'd answered her plea. And she said, "Thank you." Just that, thank you, small and cracked and completely genuine. And Callum Reed, still down on that knee, still with the boy half in his arms, he looked back at her, and he couldn't say anything. He just nodded. One nod. Because I think if he'd tried to speak right then he'd have come apart entirely, and he was still enough of a soldier to not want to do that in front of a crowd. One nod, that's all, but she understood it. You could see she understood it. By now, of course, the world had caught up. The minder had reached them, white as a sheet, hands shaking, reaching for both children at once. The car's driver, 2 more guards coming at a run from inside the gate, because here's the thing people forget, the whole rest of the palace security had been reacting too, they just hadn't been close enough to be the one. Callum had been the one only because of where he was standing. Any of them would have gone, but he was the one at the gray gate. He was the one the little girl had looked at. The crowd, well, the crowd did the thing crowds do when a held breath finally lets go. It broke into noise. Not cheering exactly, not at first. More like a great wave of relief, 100 people all exhaling and exclaiming and grabbing each other's arms at once. Somebody started clapping and then it spread, and suddenly the whole length of the railings was applauding, this thunder of it rolling along the front of the palace. And Callum Reed didn't acknowledge any of it. He got to his feet slow, and I could see now that he was hurt, the way he favored that shoulder, the way he straightened up with a wince he was trying to hide. He handed the little boy carefully, so carefully, into the minder's arms. He made sure she had him. He looked at both children one more time, a quick checking look. Are they all right? Are they really all right? And then, I promise you this is true, Callum Reed stepped back. Back toward his post. Because in his head, I think, the emergency was over, and there was only one thing a man in his position did when the emergency was over. You go back to your post. You pick the line back up. You hold. He actually took 2 steps back toward that gate, hurt shoulder and all, ready to stand his silent watch again as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just. And that's when one of the senior men caught his arm, gently, and said something to him. And I couldn't hear it, but I saw Callum shake his head, that instinct, no, I'm fine, I can hold my post, and I saw the older man say it again, firmer, and put a hand flat on Callum's chest. Not now, lad. Not this time. You're done for today. Let someone take you inside. And only then did Callum Reed let himself be led away. The last I saw of him that afternoon was his back, as 2 of his own men walked him through the gray gate and up the forecourt toward the palace, one of them with an arm across his shoulders, holding him up a little, because now that it was over the adrenaline was leaving him, and the pain of that shoulder was arriving, and a man can only carry so much at once. The gate closed behind them, and the crowd was still clapping. I stood there for a long time after. I forgot about my cart entirely. I had customers, actually. A little line had formed at some point, and I hadn't served a single one, and not one of them complained. They were all just standing there like me, looking at the closed gate, the way you stare at a place where something enormous just happened even after it's finished happening. The old couple from the bench came up to my cart eventually. The man ordered 2 teas and his hand shook when he took them, and he said to me, quietly, "I've never seen anything like that in my life." And I said, "No, me neither." And I've stood on that corner 11 years. There's more to tell you. There's what came after, what happened to Callum Reed, and what the little girl did weeks later, and the one small thing that turned up on my cart one ordinary morning that made me cry right there in front of the coffee machine. But that's part 3. For now, I'll just leave you where I was left that afternoon. Standing on my corner, the applause dying down, the gray gate shut, looking at the spot on the stone where a man in a bearskin cap had knelt and held a frightened child and told him, I'm sure of it, even though I never heard the words, that he was safe. He wasn't allowed to move. He moved anyway. For a few days after, I didn't know what had happened to him. That was the hardest part, honestly. You witness something like that, a man throwing himself in front of a horse for a child, taking a blow like that across his back, and then the gate closes and he's gone and you just don't know. Is he all right? Was it worse than it looked? Nobody tells the woman with the coffee cart anything. So I did what I could. I watched. The next morning I opened my cart like always, tripped on the same crack in the pavement like always, and I looked across at the gray gate, and there was a guardsman on the post. But it wasn't him. Different lad, shorter, stood the line fine, but it wasn't Callum, and I felt my stomach drop because in my head that empty post could mean anything, and my mind went straight to the worst of it. He wasn't there the day after either, or the day after that. I asked around. You'd be surprised what a coffee cart is. It's a little island where people stop and talk. A postman I know stopped by, and one of the palace groundsmen who buys a bun off me most mornings, and I asked them both, careful, not wanting to seem like I was prying. Have you heard anything about the guard? The one from Thursday? And it was the groundsman who finally told me. He was all right. Banged up, but all right. The shoulder and some ribs cracked, not broken, though cracked ribs is nothing to laugh at. I've had them. You feel it every time you breathe for weeks. Bruising down his whole back where the horse caught him, but nothing that wouldn't heal. He'd been kept in overnight to be sure, and then sent home to rest. Home to rest. I nearly cried into my own coffee machine with relief when the groundsman said it, and I'd never even had a proper conversation with the man. All right, he was all right. The story got out, of course. These things do. Somebody in that crowd had filmed it. Of course they had 100 phones up along the railings. It would have been stranger if nobody had. And within a day or two there was a clip going round. Shaky far off, but you could see it. The horse, the boy, the flash of red as Callum came off his post, the grab, the hit, the folding down onto one knee. I watched it more times than I'd like to admit. It's a strange thing, seeing something you lived through played back from someone else's angle. It looked even more frightening on the screen than it had felt in the moment, if that makes sense. In the moment I'd been too stunned to be properly scared. Watching it after, safe, knowing how close it came, that's when the fear caught up with me. The palace put out a short statement. They always keep those things brief. It said the young prince was safe and unharmed. It thanked the guardsman for his, I remember the word they used, his decisive action. It confirmed he'd been injured and was recovering well. Decisive action. Such a small, tidy phrase for what I'd seen, but I understood it. Some things you can't put in a statement. You'd need to have been standing on my corner. What the statement didn't say, what people argued about online actually, was the whole business of him leaving his post. There's always someone ready to argue. A few voices saying a guard should never break the line, that there's a reason for the rule, that if everyone abandoned their post whenever they felt like it, the whole thing falls apart. And I understood that argument too, in a cold sort of way. But most people, nearly everyone, said the obvious thing. The human thing. That a rule that would have a man stand still and watch a child get trampled isn't a rule worth keeping in that one moment. That the whole point of guarding a place is to guard the people in it. That Callum Reed hadn't abandoned his duty at all. He'd done it, the realist version of it, the version underneath the ceremony. I know which side I'm on, you probably do too. He came back to the post about 3 weeks later. I'll never forget that morning. I was midway through the early rush, steam going, and I glanced up out of habit at the gate, and there he was. Callum Reed, back on the gray gate, straight-backed, still, rifle at his side, staring front at nothing, exactly as if he'd never left, as if none of it had ever happened. I don't know what came over me. I left my cart. I actually left it mid-rush, walked across the road right up to the railing near his post, not too close. I know you're not meant to crowd them, and I just said, quiet, welcome back. He didn't move, of course. Couldn't. He was on duty, and the line is the line. But his eyes flicked to me. Just the eyes, that little movement I'd noticed him do for the small children. They flicked to me, and there was the smallest, I mean the smallest, softening at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. He'd never break like that. But enough. Enough to say I see you and thank you and I'm all right. And then his eyes went back front, and he was the statue again. I went back to my cart. And I'll tell you, I served the rest of that morning's rush with a lump in my throat the size of a fist. Now the thing on the cart. This is the part I really wanted to get to, because this is the part that turns it from a story about a brave man into something else. Something I still don't have a proper word for. You'll see why. It was a few weeks after he came back. An ordinary morning. Cold by then, a proper autumn, my breath in the air, the tourists thinner. I came round the corner, tripped on the crack like always, and went to set up my cart. And there was something on it. Sitting right on the little steel counter where I put the sugar and the napkins. A small envelope, cream-colored, good paper, weighted down under a stone so the wind wouldn't take it. My name wasn't on it. Nothing was on it. Just an envelope waiting. I looked around. Nobody. Just the early street, a jogger, a man walking a dog. I opened it. Inside was a card, hand-drawn, a child's drawing. It was a picture of my coffee cart. You could tell it was mine. She got the little striped awning, the coffee machine, even a stick figure me behind it with what I think was meant to be my apron. And next to the cart, a tall stick figure in a black hat with a red jacket. A guard. And two smaller figures, a girl and a boy, holding hands. And along the bottom, in careful, wobbly child's letters, it said, "Thank you for helping look after everyone. From Amelie and Rowan." I stood on that cold corner and I cried, right there. I didn't even try not to. Because here's what got me. It wasn't just a thank you to Callum. She'd have found ways to thank him, I'm sure, properly, inside those walls. This was a thank you to me. The woman with the cart. The witness. The one who'd stood across the road and watched and could do nothing but watch. And I realized she'd seen me. That little girl in the middle of the worst moment of her young life, with her brother frozen in front of a horse, some part of her had clocked the whole scene. The crowd, the corner, the coffee cart, me. And weeks later, when she sat down to say thank you, she'd remembered all of it. The whole picture. Everyone who'd been there in the fear with them. I don't know how the card got onto my cart. I never found out. Someone from the palace must have walked it down in the early dark and set it there under a stone and slipped away. I like to think somebody was told exactly which cart, exactly which corner. I like to think Amelie pointed at the drawing and said, "That one, the coffee lady, make sure she gets it." I've still got it. It's laminated now. I couldn't bear for it to get ruined. It lives in the little cupboard under my counter, and on hard mornings, cold mornings, mornings when I've tripped on the crack and spilled the milk and wondered why I still do this after 11 years, I take it out and look at it. A drawing of a cart, a guard, and two children holding hands. Thank you for helping look after everyone. I see Callum read most mornings still. He's back to buying his coffee before his shift, black, no sugar, morning. Same as ever. We've never once talked about that Thursday. Not properly. It sits between us, understood, and neither of us needs to poke at it. But there's one thing that changed. That little habit of his, the eye flick down when a small child comes to the railings. It's stronger now. I catch it more often. And once, just once, I saw a tiny boy at the gate lift up a toy, a little car this time, and swoop it through the air, exactly the way Rowan had swooped that plane. And I watched Callum Reed's whole body go still in a different way. A watchful way. His eyes tracking that toy the entire time it was in the air, ready, just in case, until the child's mother scooped the boy up and carried him off and the toy was safe in a small fist. Only then did Callum let his eyes go front again. He never left his post, never moved. To anyone else he was just a guard staring at nothing. But I know what I was looking at. I was looking at a man who'd learned in 10 seconds on a warm Thursday afternoon exactly what he was guarding. And it was never the gate. It was never the stone or the palace or the ceremony or the line. It was them, the small ones, the frightened ones, anyone who might one day look up at him and say please. I've told this story a lot of times now, to customers who ask why I've got a child's drawing laminated behind my counter, to my sister, to anyone who will stand still long enough, and people always ask me the same thing at the end. They ask, weren't you scared? And I say yes, of course, terrified. But then they ask the other thing. They ask what I think about most when I remember it. And it's not the horse. It's not the run or the hit or even the drawing as much as I love that drawing. It's the little girl's voice. That one word cutting clean through a screaming crowd, aimed at the one man close enough to matter. Please. She didn't know the rules. She didn't know he wasn't allowed to move. She just looked at the nearest grown-up in the whole terrifying world and asked for help, the way a child does, trusting completely that a grown-up would come. And he did. That's the whole thing, really. That's why I still tell it. In a world that can feel so hard and so cold, a little girl said please, and a man who wasn't allowed to move came running anyway. I've sold coffee on that corner 11 years. I've got a few more in me yet, I think. And every single morning, I look across at the gray gate, at whoever's standing it, and I remember that the stillest, hardest-looking man you ever saw might just have the softest thing in the world hidden right underneath all that stone. You just have to know what he's really guarding.